Welcome back, friends. We're going to be doing chapter 0.6, multiplying negative and positive numbers and also dividing negative and positive numbers. So let's get to it. Okay, so this is chapter 0.6, and the product or a quotient between a positive number and a negative number is negative. So if you're multiplying a positive times a negative, that's going to equal a negative. And if you're multiplying a negative times a positive, that's going to equal a negative. And it doesn't matter which one's bigger or which one's smaller or anything like that. And then the product or the quotient between two positive numbers, a positive number and a positive number, is a positive. So a positive times a positive is a positive, and a positive times a positive is a positive. Oh, that's silly. That's the same one. I was switching them around. And then the both negative. If you multiply both negative, a negative times a negative, you get a positive. I have to erase that. That was so silly, right? To have that, because you know how I switched that around. No, it didn't switch around. Okay, so anyway, so we're going to give a try to these. So number 2 is 8 multiplied by negative 4. And so I already know it's going to be, this is positive, that's negative, so the answer is going to be negative. And then now all I have to do is 8 times 4, which is 32. And then this is a little bit tricky for some people, and it may be even a little bit bad notation, but when I have parentheses around the whole negative 8, the base here, the base, is considered to be the whole thing, negative 8. And this exponent 2 tells me to write the base twice. So this would be negative 8 times negative 8. And then that would be a negative times a negative is a positive, right? And I don't have to write a positive. And then 8 times 8, 64. So positive 64. Whereas here, and this is where, you know, the notation, and it's just what's considered. And so what's considered the base here is just the 8 without the parentheses around it. So it's only what the 2 is acting on. And a lot of people will read this the opposite of 8 squared. And so the opposite just holds still. Order of operations, opposites kind of like subtracting, right? Taking and that's last in order of operations, where exponents is second. And so the negative here is just going to go along for the right, and then I'm going to write the 8 twice because that's the base, 8 times 8. And so when I look at this, that's 64, negative 64. So those are different. Your calculator knows too that they're different. So if I put this in with the parentheses, and I am using the negative key here. Oh, I don't have it where you can see my calculator. Oh, it's because I made it a little bit, I think I'm gonna not like that. I don't know. Anyway, so this, I can't change it. So there, and I'm going to square it. And so that's going to give me 64. Whereas if I take those parentheses out, negative 8 squared, right, it gives me the negative 64. So your calculator does know. A lot of times people tell me that their calculator got it wrong. And I agree with you. There are some calculators that will get this wrong. It's true. And most of them are older. So it's a lot of times a student has borrowed a calculator or found a calculator in the drawer at home. And this calculator is 15 years old, 20 years old. Who knows how old this calculator is. And it didn't get that always right. It expected you to know. So this is number 20. And so order of operations, that's 3 take away 7. And so if I think about my 3 fingers there, right, and I'm going to remove 7. So do you guys agree that I can remove all 3 of these? And then I'm going to, 4 more, right, to be able to take away 7. So this would be negative 3, and this is going to be minus 4, right? 3 take away 7 is minus 4. I'm sorry, that's my kitty cat. She usually only goes to church with me on Zoom. She doesn't usually go to school. And so we call her the Anglican cat. But today she wanted to be the BC cat for some reason. So negative 3 times negative 4, a negative times a negative is a positive, so this is 12. And here, so we come over here, we're going to have to do these exponents first because of the order of operations. And so this is going to be, I'm just going to put this one over here, negative 2 to the third, just so that you can see what it's going to be. Negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2, right? So I have a negative times a negative is a positive. So a positive times a negative is a negative. So because I have 3 negatives, this is going to be negative. And then 2 times 2 times 2 is 8. So that's going to be negative 8. And if I write it like this, 10 minus 8. I see people write it like that all the time. And now it looks like 10 subtract 8 instead of 10 multiplied by negative 8. Because that's what the 10 was doing with this, is it was multiplying. And so this is subtract 5 times. And then there's going to be one more of them. Do you guys agree? Negative 2 to the fourth is going to be negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2, because there's 4 of them. And a negative times a negative times a negative times a negative is going to be a positive. Some people say that when you're multiplying and it's an even number of negatives, you get a positive, and certainly that's true. And we're going to get 16, right? 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 is 16, so positive 16. So this is 5 times 16. And then here we're going to have, when we multiply those together, we're going to have negative 80, right? A positive times a negative, negative 80. Subtract. And then 5 times 16, I think 5 times 16 is 80 as well. And so I'm nearly certain it is. So that's 80. And so now I have negative 80 subtract 80. And if you're thinking 0, I'm going to tell you, wait, go back up, be careful, right? I'm owing 80 and they're going to take out 80 more. And so if I already owed 80 and they remove 80 more from my account, I'm going to owe 160. Now you can rewrite this as negative 80 plus the opposite, which is negative 80, right? So you can write it like that, and then you have 2 debts so that you can see them. So negative 160. And you certainly can put that in your calculator like you see it. I'm not happy with how close I've gotten here, and I'm not sure how I'm going to back it out, but I'm going to put in my 10, and then I'm going to put in my parentheses and my negative 2 raised to the, now raised to the third, I had raised to the second right there, and so when I want to raise to the third, I have to use this button right here, which lets me raise to whatever I would like. So I put that, and it goes upstairs there, and I can then push my 3, and then it has raised to the third. And then now I'm up there, and I have to use my down arrow to get down. So minus 5, and then what do I got? Parentheses, and then negative 2, raised to the fourth. I had to use that one because 4. If I was raising to the second, I could use that one. And we said it was negative 160, and certainly it is. If you had accidentally used the subtraction key right here and used the subtraction key, so if you had done that, this calculator is friendly. It says, oh, well, you didn't mean subtract there, you meant negative, but I know what you mean, so I'm going to go ahead with it, and so it would work out. So anyway, and then this is my example because they didn't have an even one that was multiplication with 0. And so I just so if you ever see EX, that means that's my example. And so negative 43 times, and I didn't have to put the times sign there. It's okay to put it there. Negative 74. Now I don't physically have to do that because whatever this is, right, times 0 is, 0. So 0 is the answer there. And then they give me here a few fractions to do and multiply them together. Now this fraction here won't reduce. The 6 won't reduce with the 5. The 6 won't reduce with the 7. 2 won't reduce with the 5 or the 7. So this fraction won't reduce, and this basically becomes a negative times a positive, which is a negative. And 6 times 2 is 8. 12, sorry. I added, I don't know why. And 5 times 7 is 35. So negative 12 over 35. And then this whole base, right? So this is what I'm thinking in my head. The base is negative 2/5. And what I want to do is write that twice. So this is negative 2/5 times negative 2/5. And I'm multiplying a negative times a negative, so that's going to be a positive. I don't have to write it. And 2 times 2 is 4. And 5 times 5 is 25. So 4 over 25. And here, I'm multiplying on number 60, a negative 1/5 times a negative 5x, right? And in my head, I'm thinking, well, a negative times a negative is a positive, right? So I'm just really thinking about the 1/5 times the 5 over 1, because I want to write the whole number 5. I know I still have the x there, right? I'll say I still have the x there. And I did the negative times the negative equals a positive, right? So I just kind of said, oh, I'm not going to worry about that anymore. And here the 5 and the 5 reduce with one another. So I get 1x, which is the same. 1 times x is x, which is just x. So I'm always asked, would I get it wrong if I wrote 1x? Because my teacher last semester, if I wrote 1x, would say I didn't simplify it. And because 1 times x is x. Whereas if you had 2x or 2 times x, you would need to write 2x. You couldn't just now have, it's because 1 times anything is just the anything, right? So 1's kind of a special number. And you really should get in the habit of writing 1x as just x. No one else is going to write it as 1x. And so that will be confusing to you later if you don't get into the habit of doing that. But would I actually mark you wrong for it? The answer is, I don't know, probably not. Kind of, I understand though where people are coming from. So now we're going to be distributing a negative here, and we'll give a try to it. So when we just, because we can't add 4x and 5, they're not like terms. And so we're going to be distributing, so we're going to multiply here, right? So this is going to be negative 3 times 4x. The plus comes down, plus. And then we're going to multiply here, right? Negative 3 times 5. And then take away 20. And yeah, I'm in the generation of people that would, because it's a negative number, want to stick parentheses around it. But I see that there's books that don't do that now, and I'm okay with that. But it makes me feel funny to have the add sign and then a sign that looks like the subtraction sign, but really was a negative sign. Anyway, so I try to be careful about that, I guess. And so this is negative 12, right? So negative 12x. And this is negative 15 plus negative 15, and I would want parentheses around that, and then minus 20. And however you look at this, this is not like terms with either one of those, but these are like terms. And so when you go to put those together, if you wanted to rewrite this subtraction as an add, this would be add, and then you put your finger over it, the opposite of 20, minus 20, right? And so if you wanted to rewrite this, so this was an addition, because they say if you're confused to do that, well then now when you add those together, you can see that you're adding a negative plus a negative. And when you add a negative plus a negative, you just add the numbers together. 15 and 20 is 35, and then you give them the negative sign, negative 35. And they threw that in there on you. And so now I have negative 12x plus negative 35, which is exactly the same as negative 12x subtract 35. So adding a negative, right, is exactly the same as subtracting. And so I have add of a negative is a subtract, so I could replace that if I liked, and they will in the back of the book, and you'll get used to it. So it seems like, oh my gosh, You know, when you're learning anything new for the first time, it seems like I'm not going to get used to that. I'm not going to be able to do that. And it starts to become natural. And I like to tell the story about people and their positive and their negative numbers, about two students I had. I love both of them. They were such nice students. And they were both so confused on their positive and negative numbers. And when they left, I was like, oh heavens, these poor people. And then the next day, one of them had gone home, and for whatever reason, it clicked, and it made sense to her. And the next day, when she came back to school, her friend had not got the click that she had. And what was funny to me, not funny, haha, but just it's how people are, right? Yesterday, she didn't know how to add positive and negative numbers. Yesterday, she wasn't sure on multiplying positive and negative numbers, or subtracting them, or dividing them. And she had the aha moment when she went home, but her friend didn't. And today, she doesn't remember that she didn't know how to do it yesterday. And she was so critical of her friend. I mean, she's like, can't you see what this is? It's so simple. And so if you're feeling like the friend that hasn't had the aha moment, it will come, because it was a few days later and the friend was like, it's like, and both of them kind of felt like they never didn't know it, is what they felt like, which is wonderful, and went on and did really well in the class. So just keep working at it. That's what it takes, is it takes practice. Anyway, okay, so I think that's the end of 0.6.